What is up, Planeswalkers? Therex6 back with some more Magic the Gathering Arena. Today we start our first journey into the new player experience decks. So I'm actually not going to do a full deck list for like the actual out-of-the-box deck. I'm just going to scroll through so all of you can see the cards while I talk about what I decided to do with this series. So I asked people what exactly I should do, how close to the decks I should be, and I decided to show off two different versions. And by show off, I mean do a deck tech for two and only gameplay for one. So the mono white deck especially suffered from being not good. However, what I decided is at least one of the decks will be made consistent, so that you know, the deck tries to be a little bit more in line with a deck that someone can actually play and like expect to get the cards that they want on time. And then the other one will be me taking the deck and putting in only common and uncommon cards that like actively make the deck better. So this is the new player white consistency deck. Essentially what you just want to do when you're making these decks is up the consistency. What I would do for any new players listening is play the deck a few times in the quick play ladder. That's essentially just like the free play thing. It'll match you up as best as it can with your deck level, so you shouldn't be going up against crazy decks. Take it in there a few times, see what cards you prefer playing with, what cards seem to be underperforming for you, and try to make them 4-ofs and 3-ofs to the best of your ability. Obviously the rares I decided not to make any larger, and some of these cards like Meteor Golem, it just wasn't necessary to have them be 3 and 4-ofs because they're kind of top end. And this does seem like it wants to be a little bit more tempo-y. So I decided to go ahead with 4 Daybreak Chaplains, 3 Night's Pledge, because it buffs, you know, the lifelink, 4 Silverbeaks instead of the Swiftclaw or the whatever the Oreskos guy is, because the evasion matters a lot more, and the double mono white doesn't actually matter, and it works better with Night's Pledge. 3 Takes Vengeance. We want to make sure like we actually have removal. Going up on the 4 Line Breakers, 3 of these, 3 of these. Essentially all of the changes I made were making the deck a little bit more consistent, and that's all you really want starting out, right? You want to be able to be playing a deck where you're getting the cards on a consistent basis in a bunch of different scenarios, and in those scenarios you'll be able to learn the different aspects of the game. So then I'll take you to the deck I decided to turn this into, and essentially it's a life link or a life gain deck, right? I essentially thought, since there was, you know, the Chaplain, the Herald of Faith, was that in there? Yeah, the Herald of Faith, Zetalpa was okay, and it had Leonin as well. I assume since those are in there, I think it was fine taking it into the lifelink direction, and I already knew that lifelink is a relatively successful deck. Often it is played with the cat sub-theme, or even the cat main theme with lifelink being a secondary. But I know that this is something that's proven, so I grafted it into the mono white deck. And if this is a deck that new players like, or if there's just a deck that you like that you're seeing people play, or that you made yourself, what you might want to do, if you especially don't like net decking, is you take a net deck, right, and then you take your list or a list for new players, and you just graft them together in such a way that like you're trying to maintain the strengths of each other while limiting the weaknesses, right? Can I think of an example of this? Sure. So if you're playing like red-black pirates, and you see that the Gutter Snipe deck is doing really well, what you could do is you could say, okay, I can say these are some of my worst pirates. Instead of adding the full Gutter Snipe package, maybe I should just be running a few more burn spells. If I'm running up against a lot of aggro, I can be running the, oh goodness, I completely forgot the name of that card. Where's Merchant Wesley? There it is. Sovereign's Bite, right? So what you can do is, if you're not entirely sure how to upgrade a deck in the manner I did, look for cards that you know other people are playing and look to slot them in certain areas. So for example, I put Seal Away in this deck because it is just better than Take Vengeance, right? I should say most of the time. And the reason for this is because Take Vengeance requires you to get hit at sorcery speed, because, where is it? Goodness, there it is. It requires you to get hit first. Unless you're playing something that makes them come in tapped already, since this is sorcery speed, you're going to get hit. With Seal Away, you're not necessarily going to get hit. Additionally, Seal Away can hit gods. It can hit things that are indestructible. And even though you shouldn't be running up against those most of the time, you might, right? So you just want to have a removal spell that's a little bit more versatile. It doesn't get rid of the creature entirely, but since this is best of one, and you really should only be playing best of one if you are a new player, until you've been able to learn the ropes of your deck and build a sideboard that can compete against the decks that you're facing, especially ones that you're having a problem with. So the reason that we really want to have Seal Away is because there aren't actually that many main deck enchantment removal cards in best of one. So having them not actually die is often a boon, since they can't get their death triggers. By the way, for those who are a little bit more in franchise, you can go ahead and skip straight to the actual gameplay. I am going to talk a little bit about things like this, where I'm kind of discussing the cards from a new player's perspective, because that's what this series is for. It's for new players who are getting into the game, who may say, I really like white, I want to be playing white, so this is what that's for. Just letting you guys know. The links to the timestamps are in the description below. Anyway, so we ended up adding Leonin Vanguards 4 of, and that's something I need to just keep reiterating. You want consistency in your decks. Even though, like, there might be some cool cards, if it's a cool card like Splashy Top End, that's fine to have as a 1-of, right? But when it's the backbone of your deck, you really want them to be 4-ofs and 3-ofs, just to make sure you see them on a consistent basis. So the backbone really is Leonin Vanguard and Ajani's Pridemate. Vanguard is something that gets in early. It can be an early blocker against aggro, and it can help really easily power up your Ajani's Pridemate. And Ajani's Pridemate really is the power hitter of this deck. You want to land an Ajani's Pridemate as soon as you can and keep getting incremental life gain value and be attacking with this card. Daybreak Chaplain is one of the cards that helps you meet that goal. It has lifelink, so you are able to either block or attack and get that one life boost, which will buff up your Ajani. Additionally, since it's a 1/3 stat line, against aggro decks, we're going to do a pretty okay time. Obviously, this doesn't do as well against control decks, but you shouldn't be facing too many control decks low in the ladder, since a lot of control decks do require a vast investment in rares and mythics. So mostly what you should see is large creature decks or aggressive decks. So Daybreak Chaplain helps a lot with that. Seal Away, as I already talked about, is kind of just a better take vengeance. Desert Hold, interestingly, is essentially a better... Goodness, where is that card? I think it's Luminous Bonds. Yeah, Luminous Bonds, which is what was in the deck initially. So Luminous Bonds is a common, and this is uncommon, so you're going to have to spend some wildcards for it. But Luminous Bonds makes it so they can't attack or block. This does that and more, right? So if you have a desert, and we did put some deserts in here, you gain 3 life. That works perfectly with your deck. 1, it stems the bleeding a little bit against aggro. 2, it really works with your Ajani's Pridemate. And 3, it also has an additional line of text at the bottom. And its activated abilities can't be activated. That's very important when you're going up against something like, and I really hope that you aren't playing this deck, but you might. Something like the Scarab God, something like Hazaret, these things that have activated abilities that you really don't want to activate, right? You want to stop their gods, especially the Scarab God and Hazaret, because you don't want them to keep having that utility. With Luminous Bonds, you don't get that, right? So when you're looking to upgrade your deck, try and find cards that are very similar slots. I would even say if Desert's Hold was 4 mana, it might still be worth running over Luminous Bonds, because the extra life gain and extra utility that you get from having it so that they can't activate abilities is very, very strong, especially in a best of one format, again, where there isn't a lot of enchantment removal. Next up, we go with Inspiring Cleric. Now, the deck was running Loxodon Linebreakers. Inspiring Cleric essentially is just a better version of that card in this deck, right? Again, it's an uncommon, so it is technically a cost in terms of wildcard usage, but the fact that it gains you 4 life means that, again, you're stemming the tide against aggro, it buffs your Ajani's Pridemate, and it's not actually a great body against aggro because it technically trades down, right? It can die to 1-drops and 2-drops, but the life gain is important. The fact that it does have 3 power means it's probably going to block efficiently. And since I said earlier that our 2-drops weren't great against control, this is. Because having 3 power is a decent body for 3 mana to start pressuring control's life total. Another great card against control is Militia Bugler. This wasn't a direct 1-to-1 slot upgrade. This was just a card that I realized was decent in this deck. Obviously, you can't hit something like Inspiring Cleric, but you can actually hit a decent number of things with it in your low end. You know, and having that consistency means that this is going to hit more consistently. Additionally, it hits itself, but other than that, right, you still get to look at your top and maybe get something of value, which can help you keep the pressure on against control. It has vigilance, so against aggro you can attack and block with it. It's just a generally good card, and that is something that you want to have as a new player. Just a generally good card that can help you out against higher powered decks. Cast Out is just more removal. I wanted to have a lot of removal since we don't know necessarily what types of things newer players are going to be playing on the ladder. You want to make sure you have a catch-all, and this is a catch-all. If and Bolas forbid this happens, if you're going up against like planeswalkers, this can get rid of them, right? Maybe you're flooding out and you really need like an actual like attacker. This can cycle and get it. The fact that it has flash means that if your opponent is playing something super dumb with haste or something, you are able to get rid of it. But this hits any non-land permanent. Anything that you really need to get rid of, you can get rid of with this card. It's just a good card to have, a good catch-all answer. Leonin Warleader is actually fantastic in this deck. If you have... Excuse me for just a moment. I need to get water. I'm dumb. I had my water here the whole time. I feel so dumb. Oh, goodness me. If... I'm not cutting that out, darn it. If you have rare wildcards to spend, the first place I would spend them is on Warleader. The reason for this is that it's a good card against aggro and control. A 4-mana 4/4 is a fine stat line, and the fact that when it attacks, it's attacking for 6 power, 2 of which is lifelink, and since that lifelink is stapled across 2 bodies, you're getting 2 triggers with the Johnny's Pridemate. This isn't just like per turn, this is whenever you would gain life, right? So Warleader is just a fantastic card. If you want to upgrade the power of your deck, I would definitely suggest bringing in more Leonin Warleaders, not Relic Warders, and taking out some of the other high-cost cards, maybe a Star-Crowned Stag. However, since I didn't really see any great 4s to replace Stag, it's still there, and it's still fine, right? And the reason it's fine is because you need to get in with your Johnny's Pridemate. It doesn't have innate evasion, so even if it gets really large, your opponent can keep blocking with really weak, like, who cares creatures. With Star-Crowned, you can tap down their actual good blocker or their chump blocker and have a Johnny's Pridemate make a more meaningful attack. This is one of the first cards I would suggest cutting, especially for some more Warleaders. Herald of the Faith is essentially just a card that's going to try and help you close the game out against both aggro and control. So it's a 5-mana 4/3, not technically great stats, but because it has flying, a form of evasion, you are going to be able to ignore a lot of what your opponent is doing on the ground. And since you do gain that life, you're not necessarily going to care about not having that blocker, right? So against aggro, you can kind of attack with Abandon, with Reckless Abandon with this card, and trigger your Johnnies, while still pressuring your opponent, right? Like this takes a 5th of your opponent's life every time it connects. So, I think that you'll notice, right, that a lot of the cards we're playing incidentally gain you life, right? So something like, where is that card? Something like Renewed Faith isn't actually great in this deck. And the reason for that is we don't care about gaining a chunk of life. What we care about in this deck is gaining a lot of small amounts of life, right? So that's why we have life linkers. That's why we have cards that do other things that incidentally gain us life. A lot of the time, gaining bulk life isn't good. It's not efficient because it doesn't do anything. With Renewed Faith, for example, you trade 1 card and 3 mana for only 6 life. That's 2 burn spells or like 1 attack with a medium-sized creature, and that's just not worth it. Being able to cycle this card for 2 life and a draw is actually pretty good, but because we're not looking for a large chunk of life at a time, this card doesn't make the cut. Now, if we were playing something like Resplendent Angel we would want that because that cares about how much life we're gaining in a turn. So it's a synergistic thing, right? We don't need this for a synergy in our deck. What we need is things that can gain us repeatable life over the course of the game. So that's why we have this type of setup. We have one Inspiring Commander, one of the weird arena-only cards that some people don't like. It's a good card because we are ostensibly a low-end deck, right? We have a ton of cards at 2 and 3, and not a ton going forward. So this card essentially just makes it so we don't run out of gas, mostly against control. The fact that it's a 1/4 for 6 isn't great. It means that against the creature decks, you might have a bad time. But if you want, maybe craft a second one of these if it's really doing well for you. I wouldn't craft more than that. I wouldn't run more than 2 of these cards just because of how non-impactful they are as soon as they hit the board. Serra's Guardian is an okay card. 6 mana, 5/5, Flying Vigilance. Other creatures you control have Vigilance. It's a fine card. However, when you look at other 6 drops that I'll get to in just a second. This is a 5/5 or a 5-drop, I should say, and it's better than Serra's. Obviously, this is a mythic, and this is just a rare. But these are the types of things you might want to be looking for. Lyre Dawnbringer is great for gaining life. It's great for stabilizing against aggro because it has first strike, so they can't attack very well. It's great against control because it's just a really efficient beater. Additionally, Crested Sunmare would be a good inclusion in this deck because we are incidentally gaining a lot of life, and when we gain life, we get some sweet indestructible horses. But yeah, when you look at the other 6 drops, right? They even this common, right, is kind of similar. Obviously, it's not as good at attacking because it has less life and it doesn't have vigilance. But the jump from common to rare for this card isn't very wide, right? So this is a card that's probably fine to cut, even to get more Warleaders, and you can cut like a land along with it if you're lowering your curve. But it's a fine card for now. Zetalpa Primal Dawn. I wanted to cut this because oh, the thing's scrolling. Because it's not great in the style of deck because it does cost 8 mana. However, something I've noticed is that new players, and I did this when I was new as well. New players do absolutely tend to not attack. They tend to worry a little bit about it. So a lot of new players will be sitting on boards, just kind of staring at each other, and that will lead to game states where you get to 6, 7, 8 mana. Right, so this is still a fine card to include for a new player deck. I wouldn't add more. If you do, I think you would have to fundamentally change your mana base and fundamentally change how the deck plays out, because then you'd want to focus a little bit more on Zetalpa. But it is what's called a bomb, just a really, really good, strong card by itself. This thing is not getting removed. They could, seal away it or cast it out or something, but if you can land this and get in a single attack, you're probably going to win. So then we're going to move on to lands. This was just 25 planes. You really want to look at and pay attention to the common and uncommon offerings for lands, right? In this type of deck, we don't need Evolving Wilds because we're not looking to fix our lands in any way. Field of Ruin, I actually put over here in the sideboard just to point out that it's actually a decent card once you get higher up in the ranks, because a lot of people are playing many color decks, decks that are running things like Arch of Araska, things like Search for Azcanta. I don't know why I forgot that. And those lands can run away with the game. So having the ability to destroy them is good. And if you're new, you might think that land destruction is just awful and that no one should do them. Land destruction like this is actually very fine and very fair because it only hits non-basics and you each get a land back, right? So no one's going down a land. You are going down on tempo, but you're getting rid of a very important card. So Field of Ruin is definitely a card that you might want to look out for if you're starting to climb in rank. The rest of these, it really depends on the deck that you're playing, right? There's not necessarily a reason to run something like Sunscorched Desert in this deck. We're not a super aggressive deck. Zhalfirin Void is maybe fine if you're finding that you just you keep running into Mana Screw. This is a way to alleviate that somewhat without actually getting getting rid of your lands. So this will just mean that you can make sure your next draw isn't dead. Yeah, I mean, you just want to look at the common and uncommon lands and see what they have on offer. So this card, why didn't I add this card? It comes in tapped, and what it does doesn't do enough, right? 4 mana and sacrificing a land to get 2 1/1s isn't a great deal. Whereas Desert of the True, we're running 3 of, because if we are flooding out, we can cycle this to get a different card, right? Additionally, it's a desert, which works with Desert Hold, and it works with Shephet Dunes to buff our team and maybe make the play where we can kill our opponent. And you might be saying, I have to pay a life to add white. One, that isn't a bad deal in general, right? Even if this weren't a life gain deck, paying 1 life here and there to add a single white to your mana pool isn't going to kill you, right? Your life is a resource, and you should definitely view it as such. You want to make sure that you are getting your cards on time and not losing power level because you're worried about killing yourself. You're not going to kill yourself with this card, right? It's maybe going to deal 3 damage to you, maybe, but this is a mono white deck, right? We have 18 planes. That is not going to be fun. Not going to be too big of a deal. Shephet Dunes will help us a little bit if we go super wide in our early game to just get through our opponent. And again, it is also a desert to help with Desert Hold. And this is something I really want to point out, how much interplay we have within our deck, right? I just want to talk really quickly about Shieldmare. Shieldmare is another uncommon card that is decent. It does gain you life, and it gains you more life if your opponent tries to get rid of it. But I didn't put it in just because I felt that the body was not good enough, and we weren't going to be trying to attack against red decks with our Shieldmare, like, in general. And then Ixalan's Binding is just another kind of catch-all card. If you're finding that you really can't deal with several copies of a card, you'd want to bring in, or not bring in, but you'd want to maybe replace a couple of cast-outs for Ixalan's Binding. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my sideboard, because those 3 cards are played relatively frequently, especially compared to some of the other cards in here. So we don't want this modifying our deck's power level, because in quick play, they base you on your rank in addition to the deck power level. So we're going to go ahead and get into the game. I know it's been a long deck list discussion, but I think it's important that I make sure people are getting as much information as they can. So we're going up against Whamilton, and you'll see that this person is in high bronze. Now, the reason they're in high bronze instead of like low bronze is because I'm in medium high silver. So I'm actually going to talk real briefly about this. So this is actually a fine hand. The reason is we're going first, and we have an early removal spell. We have a medium removal spell, and we have a kind of early-ish attacker that can give us more creatures, and we have a mid-game attacker. Yes, we do have 2 Shephet Dunes that might hurt us, but all of these only have 1 white pip. That's what this little thing is. And because of that, this 1 plains will mean we don't need to tap these for any pain mana. The reason for that is because it takes into account the deck's power level and your opponent's rank. So since I am a relatively high rank, I'm pulling up my deck's my deck's ranking essentially, and I'm going to get an opponent who is slightly higher than what this deck would maybe want to come up against. Let's see, is there anything else? So that is good, and we are going to just play this, right? They don't have anything on the board right now, so we don't need to play the Seal Away during their turn, right? We're not going to be attacked by anything heinous, right? So we're just going to play our 1-drop, and we can just go and end the turn. Yeah, I mean, this is still fine. Let's see if our opponent deploys anything to the board. And for these new player videos, I am going to try and focus a little bit more on explaining like all of my things. So if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, I'm not going to be offended if you don't watch this, if you don't like this video, because this isn't necessarily for you. I wanted to make sure I was talking in great detail about the decks that I'm playing here, because these are new player decks, right? They're meant for new players. If you guys also enjoy it, if the enfranchised people who've been with me a long time also enjoy it, that's awesome. Thank you very much. But I want to make sure that new players can come into this video, watch it front to back, and have a real understanding of not only the deck, but how they can modify the deck to suit their own needs and how they're able to play it as well. So my opponent isn't doing anything here, and that is unfortunate. For those of you who are super new to card games, this is what's called roping. I don't know if they did it on purpose. This is very likely a relatively new player, right? Just because they are in bronze still, you know, they're playing just like planes. So it is possible that they are just a relatively new player. So we got a sweet Desert Hold, which is fantastic. Apologies about the sync. And what we'll do here, so sometimes you'll see people say that like you need to play things during your second main phase. That's not always the case, right? If I had a second creature here, I would want to play this before I attack. And the reason for this is because this triggers when I go to attacks if I have 3 creatures, right? So that's just a random thing. But what I'm going to do is I'm not going to give my opponent information that I have a play in hand, right? If they know I have a play, or they know I'm tapped out, they might make a decision that they otherwise might not. So sometimes it's correct to play on second main, sometimes it isn't. So we're going to play Bugler here and hope that we hit something. And even if we don't, that's fine. So let's see, did we hit something? We did not hit anything, and that's okay. Next turn, I might want to cycle this because I have 2 removal, right? I have 2 removal spells in my hand, right? So I don't necessarily need the 3rd, but I am missing a 4th land, and I'm going to want to get that. I got the 4th land, so I no longer need it. That said, this is a very strong card, and the reason this is a strong card is because it can make it so that it turns their smaller creatures into card draw, right? They pay 1 more mana when they get a low-powered creature, and they can essentially keep going through their deck for this tax of 1. And they can really drown us in what's called card advantage. They can make it so that we run out of cards and they keep having cards. So we want to get rid of this card actually really quickly, but you should notice something here. This says their activated abilities can't be activated. Activated abilities are abilities that have a cost followed by a colon and then the effect. This card is not an activated ability because there's no colon here. There's no cost followed by a colon. This is a triggered ability, right? So we can't use Desert Hold to get rid of this card. So we're actually going to cast this out right now. And the reason we're going to cast it out right now instead of using Flash is because we are going to be able to get in with our 1/1. Additionally, we don't want to give them any chance of activating that ability and gaining advantage, right? So since we got the land and we wanted to get rid of a card, we did use the cast out. So let's see if our opponent plays something large here. So they play Seal Away on this. Very important, I forgot to note, this has Vigilance, right? They sealed away a card, they paid 2 mana to get rid of a 1 mana card. Okay, they decided to concede. I think that was probably a little bit hasty. I don't think our opponent needed to concede there, but it's fine. If you're finding that maybe your build isn't exactly what it's cracked up to be, absolutely feel like you shouldn't feel pressure to stay in the game. Concede, change your deck a little, come back. But what you should do is try and play games going against, is it L Switchblade? Yeah, I was thinking maybe it's EI Switchblade, but I think it's L Switchblade. But you definitely want to try and go all the way to the end of a game, like until your opponent kills you. And the reason for this is because you get valuable information on what you actually need to change in your deck. If you're only playing till the first 4th turn, you won't necessarily know if your late game is bad or if your early game is actually fine, but your mid game removal is bad, right? So in terms of this hand, this is also a decent keep. We have an early proactive card. We have some good reaction cards in the mid game, and we have a Leonin Warleader, one of our powerhouse cards. We also have the mana to cast at least half of them, right? And that's very important. So this is a good keep. We are going second, which is slightly unfortunate. However, it's not too big a deal. Okay, and we got our 4th land. That does mean we are going to at least be able to play these 2 cards as well. So again, our opponent is on mono white. All right, they also have a Shapadoons, very, very good to see. They're also in low silver. I think this is silver 3. Okay, so they played an Adorned Pouncer. That is fine. So Adorned Pouncer, luckily for us, we can block really easily with our Daybreak Chaplain. I really should have used that past turn. Okay, so we got another Plains. So that is a little unfortunate, right? Because we don't really need this 5th Plains until way later in the game. So let's see if our opponent does anything to buff up this Pouncer. Now, if they do, that's actually fine. Okay, so they play Okentra's Monument. They can't attack here because I have a 1/3. This will just die. So I'll play this. Now I could Desert's Hold this, but I don't need to because this is such a good contender for this. I don't need to. And if they suit this up with anything, we have a flash spell that can get rid of it, right? So we don't actually need to do anything here. And we don't want to attack because we want to discourage them from attacking, right? Okay, so let's see if they can do anything here. They do only have 4 cards left, but they can generate value with this. We're probably going to want to cast this out because of the amount of value that they can generate. Okay, so he plays Banalish Marshal. Okay. That is fine. So they're going to want to attack with this here. And actually, darn, so importantly, right, if we had 1 more mana, we could have cast out this before damage, and this would be reverted to a 1/1. Ooh, interesting. They might choose not to attack here, which would be kind of smart for them, honestly. Let's see what they decide to do. They decide not to attack. That might be pretty smart because I am holding up mana. Okay, we got a Militia Bugler, not Bueller. That said, right, we have a lot of removal spells, and we don't know exactly what to do with them. And this is something that you're going to come up against, right? You're going to make mistakes like this. I don't even know what I should do. I can cast out the Banalish Marshal or the Oketcher's Monument. I think both are valid. I can Desert Hold one of these. I think all of those are valid. Or I could wait to seal away. Honestly, I think what I'm going to do is hope that my opponent attacks next turn, and I can seal away the Banalish Marshal and block with this. That way I'm able to get rid of 2 birds with 1 stone. So I will just pass the turn here. If my opponent does nothing, I will likely cast out either the Monument or the Banalish Marshal. Okay, so they played a Sword, but the Sword is relatively expensive to cast and activate, so I'm not too worried about it. Let's see if my opponent decides to attack here. And we want them to attack, and they decide not to. That's very unfortunate for us. So we want to use this cast out on something here. And next turn we'll have Desert Hold and Seal Away. I'm not sure what we should get rid of, honestly. If you're a new player, if you're an experienced player, let me know what you guys would do in this situation. Pause the video, let me know. The Sword actually produces more value because they're 2/2s. So I'm going to get rid of the Sword. And the reason for this is I have 2 other creature removal spells in my hand. So I'm not worried about getting rid of these. I'm worried more about getting rid of something like this that I don't have access to removal for. Here I can Bugler or Desert Hold and hold up Seal Away. I think I'm going to Bugler because that will give me another body. I do need to get bodies of the board. I'll take a Johnny's Pridemate. Unfortunately, that makes my opponent probably think, like, if I don't play this card, they, like, know I have something. So you want to take that into account. My opponent knows I have this, right? If I don't play this, that's telegraphing to my opponent that I can do something, right? And that might work in your favor, it might not. But I am going to get a Johnny down now in hopes that I will be able to, at some point, start accruing this life gain, right? Okay, so let's see what my opponent does here. And they have an Ixalan's Binding. Okay. So they have a removal spell, I assume, for my... Oh, okay, for that. Okay, sure. Okay. So here, I think I want... Here, I think I just want to play the Warleader. Yes. So I'm going to play the Warleader. If my opponent decides to suit up, and I assume they're going to suit up the Pouncer, we will be able to seal that away. So we're doing a lot of waiting, but that is fine, right? We want to get to a point where we are able to grow this Ajani to something very large, and our opponent can no longer get a ton of value out of it. I assume my opponent is going to equip this here, but I could be wrong. Okay. Playing this. Enters the battlefield. Yeah. I mean, that is a very good card for them to get. I assume they're not going to attack. Yeah, it's very unfortunate that my opponent is consistently doing this. So here I'm going to Desert's Hold. Yeah, I mean, their plays did line up pretty well against ours, which is very unfortunate. I think, because I want Banaus Marshal to go like all the way away, but I also want this to go all the way away because they're just going to keep drawing cards cycling through the deck, right? So we're seeing this. We're going to be buried in advantage here. We can't even get in with our Leonin Warleader, unfortunately. So I think I'm going to Desert Hold the Pouncer. Then play the Chaplain. And the reason I did this is just so they are more likely to put this sword on one of these. And we had to end the turn, essentially. Because they have such good blocks here. So I want them to put the sword onto one of these cards so I can seal it away. Sacred Cat? Sure. Yeah, I mean, they're just going to drown us. They're just going to drown us in advantage. So Catcher's Monument is another card that you can put in the deck. However, I don't think it's necessarily a card that works with this exact strategy. I think it is something that works better with things like Sacred Cat and Dorn Pouncer. Right, opponent has Danitha, sure. So as you can see, each time they're casting something, they're getting a card in their hand and on the field. And they're getting this and this. So, it's very likely I'm not going to be able to win this game. I'll need another cast out to get rid. Oh, I can't. The thing is, I can't even cast out because of Ixalan's Binding. I'm not going to be able to play any cast outs I get. Put it on Danitha. Interesting. Danitha does not have haste. So luckily for me, they still don't have great attacks. But unluckily for me, I don't have great attacks. I will be able to get rid of Danitha, because I assume Danitha is going to attack next turn. And this comes in attacking. So I'd be able to block and kill it relatively easily. Let's see if my opponent decides to like cash in their Shepherd Dunes here. And this is something I probably would concede from relatively quickly once I realized I really didn't have a way to get past this level of advantage. However, I want to showcase, right, that the deck isn't going to be perfect, right? This is a new deck, and you're going to come up against, you know, more tuned decks. I don't think this is, you know, a tuned deck, but it's a more tuned deck than the deck that you have, I think. And I don't think your guys are going to come up against this if you're a new player, because the main reason I wish I could zoom in on this. The main reason I am coming up against this, oh gosh, that is hideous, is because I am in relatively high silver, right? This is something I actually wanted to talk about. Gosh, that's hideous. They're still not attacking. I mean, as I said, like opponent or new players do just kind of do this. They just don't attack. These are 3 power now with Vigilance. I think they should have started attacking with their knights or their warriors, honestly. So that's another land. That's very unfortunate. At this point, I am going to concede because I would like to give you a 3rd game. But this amount of space left on board, shrinking those, is really stupid. But, you guys shouldn't experience too much deck disparity, right? The main reason I'm experiencing so much deck disparity is because it takes into consideration your rank as well. I personally don't think Best of 1 should have a rank, and a lot of people might dislike that, but going with Arbiter LPC, but I think rank should be in the best of 3 ladder, and quick play as it is should kind of just be the more casual ladder, right? And casual in the sense of not like, oh, you're playing bad decks, but casual in the sense that like you're just picking up games, right? You don't really care necessarily about winning or losing. You just want good games, right? So this hand is actually not great. And the reason for this is because we have 2 lands that come in tapped. So unless we draw another an untapped land, we're not going to be able to play on curve. However, we do have some good combinations here, as well as a potential high-end card and a cast out. I am going to keep this, but the reason I'm keeping this is because I'm going first. If I was going second, the fact that these come in tapped would make our hand way too slow. So you really want to pay attention to the hand you're keeping, not only based on the cards in your hand, but also based on whether or not you're going first or second. And I think this hand is okay going first. It's not good. It's not a good hand. But it's worth... Why are we going to be with like nothing but white? But it's not great going second. So I'm going past the turn here. We got a bugler, which is nice. Ooh, so this is not something I really wanted to see. However, I do want to show that you will still come up against decks like this. I assume that this isn't a full-fledged control deck. I hope it is not a full-fledged control deck. So we're going to go ahead and play Daybreak Chaplain. And follow it up with a Johnny. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to get the trigger as soon as we get this down. Unfortunately, our opponent very likely has a counterspell here. So now you have to think, do I throw a Johnny in, knowing that a Johnny is probably one of the stronger cards, or do I throw something that's okay, still a counterable spell, but isn't like the backbone of the deck? And I think honestly, you want to be mana efficient here. We should keep the cast out because this is a deck that's likely going to be playing a very large threat that's going to be hard to get rid of. So we really want to keep the cast out. So being mana efficient, we want to either play the Cleric or the Bugler. Cleric is more power against the control deck. However, they're less likely to counter it just because it doesn't do a lot. Whereas Bugler helps keep us going. So I'm going to play Bugler here. And so, interestingly, we missed everything, that's fine. Interestingly, they did not have, like, any time there. So that shows that they didn't have a counter. Oh, gosh. Yeah, so this looks like it might just be a Planeswalker deck, and that's very unfortunate. Ooh, okay. So I should be able to play a private. And now that I have a second one, I'm more okay with playing this. Okay. So we'll go ahead and attack. But yeah, it looks like this might be a Planeswalker deck. I really don't think that you guys are going to, new players who are playing this deck, I don't think you're going to come up against this level of deck too frequently. And this is obviously not a Toon deck because they're playing Raptor Spire instead of the dual lands. What the heck? Okay, I might just be insane. This might be a mill deck. I don't know what it is. Sure, let's see what they decide to play. They play Fumigate. That is unfortunate. They got rid of our stuff, and they got some stuff. I would really like a land here, so that I could deploy 2 threats. No 2 threats, but I will just play this. And the reason we're playing this is because it is stronger initially. You could argue, play a Johnny first, and then play this. But I do want to be mana efficient. So let's see what our opponent has here. What the heck? When you cast an instant sword spell. So that's something that we'd want to get rid of. Unfortunately, we can't yet. Because we have not drawn a land. So let's see. Whenever you cast... Ugh, I wish that would stay up. Create contract. Sure. Okay. So they're Bant. Okay, so yeah, their Bant approach. This really isn't something that you guys should have to deal with. I mean, I'm fairly certain this deck just folds now, and that's unfortunate, right? Like, yeah, that's not something that should have happened, frankly. And I do assume that it's because... I assume that it's because the approach decks have fallen out of favor, so approach probably isn't rated as highly by the game, and my rank is higher than his, right? That's essentially it. And this is another reason I wish that rank was not a best of one thing. If rank wasn't a best of one thing, then all the queue would care about, why would you do that? You have to show... Are you gonna actually use that? Because if he does, you have to shuffle your library now. Why would you do that? I guess they're just trying to get things. I don't know. Okay, so we got this. That's nice. So we are just going to get rid of this. Because this card is going to prove a hassle. I gotta get rid of that. Can't attack, because my opponent has things that can kill my guy. Yeah, so this is, I mean, this is the type of reason why you would want to run Field of Ruin. But, wow. Yeah, that's, I assume they're going to get rid of that again, yep. It's very unfortunate that I came up against this deck. If Best of One were just deck power, then, I mean, this wouldn't be something that would be happening. That's very unfortunate. I don't really have much to say about it. So we got another land. It's nice. I can start flying over and dealing some damage while growing my my Pridemate, but opponent's probably just going to fumigate again, settle the wreckage, play another metallic. Yeah, this is not great. So they're probably just gonna be able to kill me first, and they fumigate. Yep. So if I draw land, I will be able to play... Okay, so I can play the Commander, which can get me back into this game, right? And that's essentially why I didn't concede yet, because this is our out, right? You do want to know your outs to different situations, and that just comes with practice of a deck, right? We still are technically possible to win, because this can draw us some cards. But, I mean, our opponent is on approach, and they've already drawn half of their deck, right? It is unlikely we're going to be able to win here, especially since they can, at any time, pay. I wish I could see that more. I think it's 5, it might be 7, to get back a lot of stuff. So, yeah, this is very unfortunate, but again, you guys shouldn't be facing up against this. I do hope that I showcase the way the deck works well enough, even though I came up against some things that I don't think you guys would have to deal with. Wow. I mean, you gotta hit it to him, right? Like, this is a brew, right? It's not just a carbon copy of a deck. But I do think that this is a deck level disparity, right? I do think this person's deck is inherently stronger. I don't think I'm playing any mythics. I don't know if mythics are even, like... I don't know if the deck, like, takes that type of thing into consideration. But I do think it's incorrect to for me to have been matched up against this. I'm gonna go ahead and play Pridemate first, and Pridemate will get triggered by this, which is cool. Take action, and I will be able to Vanguard. I'll gain some more life. My Pridemate will get larger. So I mean, this is the type of thing that you want to see, right? This is how the deck operates. But unfortunately, our opponent has a crazy deck. Yeah. Gain some more life. Get a Johnny even larger. I mean, as you can see, we're at 35 life with a nice 7/7. And all this happened in like one turn, so. Yep, and then they just fumigate. Yeah, so I mean, that was our out, so we are going to go ahead and concede here. I do think the video has been long enough. Some of you might notice that I am talking a little slower. That's a combination of two things. One, I got a nasty comment. I have had a comment before saying that my cadence is a little choppy in that I, like, really quick... No, I got nothing. That's fine. I really quickly speak after I think for a while. And that was fine. This comment was mean. It essentially just said talk slower. And, you know, I've been meaning to talk slower. But it's also because I want to make sure that new players are able to understand me. I do talk fast. I recognize that. And I want to make sure that new players are able to understand essentially everything I'm saying, for the most part. So that was the deck. These are the kind of analytics for it. The deck list will be, all three of the deck lists will be in the description below. I do hope that this was helpful to any new players or any experienced players, any players who've been around for a long time. If you know someone who likes playing mono white, who hasn't gotten to Arena yet, throw them to a place that has beta codes. Go ahead and show them this video. Share this with people who you think this would help. Because this entire series, I'm going to do from mono white all the way to, what's the last color combination? Green blue, I think Simic is technically last. So I'm gonna do all of the newer player experience decks, and try and make the same style of video. Everyone is going to have a kind of long intro because I want to explain every reason why I put the cards in, and I'm probably going to have more gameplay than I typically do because I want to make sure people see the strengths and weaknesses of each deck. So I really do hope you guys liked this first inaugural part of the series. I hope you guys like the way I did it, showcasing the deck just more consistent, as well as showing off what I would actually do for that color of deck. And I really hope that this has actually helped someone. If you guys like the video, go ahead and tap that like button, add a subscription to your mana pool, and cast a comment to the comment section down below. And you know what? Not until next time. How dare I forgot to thank Easy Mode, Chris, Daniel, Flowerchild, and Chow083. If you would like to join them, they are fantastic patrons. They help me keep the channel. They help me make sure I'm able to make content like this, because this is, it's different content. I wouldn't necessarily have the time or the common wildcards to do this, but I open a lot of packs, so, and it's thanks to people on Patreon. So the link for that will be in the description below. Anyway, until next time, all will be one.